I'm Adrienne Giffen, and this is Now You're Talking. Parenting in the digital world can feel overwhelming, especially when you're balancing a career, raising teens and preteens, and trying to keep up with it all. Screens are constant, and sometimes real connection feels out of reach. This podcast is your chance to pause and breathe, a space for stories and insights that bring encouragement, perspective, and the reminder that you are not alone. Today, we're diving into the intersection of storytelling and technology with writer and creative director, Chad Stamm. Together, we explore how AI can actually deepen human connection, what it means to raise children in a digital age, and why youth exchange and global perspectives matter more than ever. We'll talk about creativity, resistance, and the courage it takes to keep growing in a rapidly changing world. If you've ever wondered how to use tech wisely while still protecting what makes us human, let the conversations begin. So, Chad, thank you very much for joining me today. It's a pleasure to have you here. And when I read about where you've come from and where your passion is about blending human narratives with digital intelligence to make meaningful connections, I just know we're meant to talk and have a meaningful conversation. So tell me more about and share what got you to this place to bring all these elements together in such a unique way.
Naturally, I come from a storytelling background as an English major in college, and then the technology part. There really is no way around it. It's here whether we want to utilize it and embrace it or not. And I always kind of fall on the side of, well, we have a tool, let's use it, and let's take advantage of it. As it relates to artificial intelligence, we're now given some of the most incredible creative tools that we've ever had in the course of humanity. So I think we want to take advantage of all those things. And then ultimately it just comes down to human connections. Even in the world of AI, it's the one thing I think is for certain, it's that AI is going to teach humans what it means to be human. It's going to force us to decide what humanity stands for. And once we get to that point, I think there's greener pastures ahead.
So tell us more about that. What does that mean about AI teaching us how to be human?
I mean, if you look at AI and you look at all of the very, very smart people, the people who created the technology, the people who are, building models and training models today, the people who won Nobel Prizes, they all kind of fall on a spectrum. And what they say is that on one end of the spectrum, we're looking at human extinction. On the other end of the spectrum, we're looking at utopia. So the reality is that all of this probably is going to fall somewhere in between. And no matter where any of those very smart people fall on the spectrum, on the scale, the one thing that they all agree on is that change is going to be significant and it's going to happen very fast. So, as it relates to, to AI and to humanity, I think we're heading into an era of potential abundance where economic systems are going to be flipped on their heads, where, work as we know it may not necessarily be work as we know it now. It may be a different type of situation where people do jobs because they sheerly want to do jobs. They just want to be a butcher, or, they want to paint, or they want to landscape and garden. Like, those could be things that we do out of joy and not out of necessity. Given that, time is potentially going to look different. I think what we do with our time is really key in terms of how we see ourselves as people.
And then before we spoke, you've talked a little bit about scarcity and how most people work today because they have to. With AI, that could flip that on its head. That's a lot.
Some of the more immediate things that we're going to see coming from AI in terms of benefits. So think about healthcare. Things are already happening in the world of healthcare where cancer diagnoses or, running test results into AI and having AI analyze these test results X-ray scanning, things like that. I think medical is probably going to be one of the first places where we start to see a lot of true benefit. And then if you want to extrapolate well into the future and you start thinking about nanotech, like, basically microscopic cells, there's going to be some very, very serious and significant health benefits that come out of this.
It's just interesting to hear because you put so much thought into this.
Yeah, it comes down to time. I think that, AI is going to lead to a situation where maybe people potentially don't have to work. Maybe there's a universal basic income. That's for a lot of higher level people to figure out. But I think the reality, and that we all are starting to see this, is that AI is going to change the way we work. It's going to change some of the jobs we do. It's going to eliminate many of the jobs that we do. So what does that mean in terms of time? Well, if we're in an era of abundance where things are not scarce, where, when there is potentially a universal basic income, where people can spend time doing what they want to do instead of what they need to do to put food on the table. What does that mean? How do people spend their time? And I think that's why, a lot of things are going to be important, and things like your board game are super critical, because there is going to be an element of humanity that I believe is probably going to, pull back even more into the digital world, especially when these digital worlds are places that we can literally create on our own to our own liking. So, like imagine that kind of scenario where, all right, I'm going to create this virtual space where I walk into that space and I'm living inside of it in a virtual sense. Maybe I don't want to leave that space. And I think, that's one of the dangers we have to look at as people we're sending into the technology. So, the flip side is, like, how do you create human interactions? How do you set up our time so we have moments where we can converse with one another and be in the flesh?
Yes. And you have a 13-year-old. So you're in that teenage years, and those years aren't easy at the best of times. But I see it as a mother, as a grandmother, if my kids have grown up, it's even more challenging raising kids now. So what is this like when you're immersed in this world of digital, and what's that like for you raising your son?
Well, to start, I'd say I don't know what it was like to raise a kid before, so I don't really have a true point of comparison.
Yeah.
But right now, it's certainly interesting. You no doubt find your kids are spending too much time on their tablet or too much time on their phone, and all right, what's going on here? My wife will look at the usage, like, all right, you've been on here too long. So there's that element, obviously, that I think everybody deals with as parents, but to me, it's almost more important, particularly as it relates to AI and the changes that are coming, making sure that they are familiar and that they know how to use these tools and how these tools are, but even potentially how to not use them and how they could be dangerous. That's obviously an important factor here too, but I think it's just teaching literacy and how to make the most of it. And again, like we were saying earlier with creativity, well, it's not just creativity, it's anything. One of the greatest prompts that I've ever used in any model, it's, is it possible to ... You start having that dialogue, and, my son over the summer, he took, with some of his other classmates, took an AI entrepreneur camp. And it was amazing because he's coming up with business ideas, and he's building out, web pages, and it's not even the business part of it. It's just realizing, like, oh my gosh, I can do this with that. And I think those are the true breakthrough moments when you ask, is it possible to do this? The more that you start to train yourself to think like, okay, I have this incredible tool, I don't even want to call it a tool, this incredible assistant, this incredible partner.
Yes.
Whether it's in school or whether it's in life, whether it's, health stuff or recipes or planning vacations, like it doesn't matter. It's like you start to think about all the things that you can use now and how you can like leverage this type of partner. What really, for me, it's important, like with the schools, and I hate it when I hear schools that are pulling back and restricting usage, and like, no, like you can't do that. You've got to teach them how to use it and why to use it, because you can use some of these, like Notebook LM, for example. You could go and you can put a syllabus, or you can take a a research paper, and you can drop it in there and turn it into an incredible learning machine. You can gamify the knowledge. You can do so much with AI that just from a sheer learning partner, it's incredible.
Wow, that's so interesting. So the people that are running the schools, they have to shift their mindset. As parents, going to be a shift in mindset. There's going to be new entrepreneurs that we've never even heard of the businesses that they're creating. It's exciting. It is so exciting, and I guess that's the utopia side. It's, as you said, it comes with its challenges as well. So with your son, we grew up, and you're a lot younger than I am, but when we grew up, we knew that we learned the basic math, and we used the basic English and that sort of thing. And that's what I see is there's things that could be lost as well. And what's your perspective on that? The foundational tools that we had as when we were growing up could be lost.
I mean, I think for me, this kind of started during COVID, and so my son was in second grade when COVID started. And, I feel like that was honestly the sweet spot to have a kid going into that type of environment age-wise, because if you were younger and you didn't necessarily know how to read, that's a very difficult situation for, a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old to all of a sudden have to switch to a virtual learning environment. And then, conversely, on the other side of that, you get into kids that are, middle school, high school age, that are missing out on very key social years. You've seen the fallout from that as well. I think my son's age was kind of the sweet spot. He knew how to read. He knew kind of how to control his day and what was going on. And essentially what those years taught him was to learn how to be a virtual worker in a sense. I've been working remote for the better part of the last 15 years. So it is a learned skill. There's no doubt. But he, learned how to learn. And I think that's the same with AI. I think it's less, the kids they're still learning English, they're still learning math. The way that they learn those things, though, are going to be different. And I think that's the true learning curve, is not necessarily the subjects, but learning how to learn.
Yes.
And in an environment where that is changing. And I think academia is one of the places that is going to be probably most impacted by AI.
Yes.
And make a lot of it obsolete, right? So it's interesting times.
It is interesting times. And knowing what you know now as a parent, because if your son was in COVID in grade 2, there's been constant change as you've been raising your son. And so knowing what you know now, what would you do the same? And what would you do differently as a parent?
Change or do anything differently. I really wouldn't. And we came out of COVID, and my son went back. His first full year was 4th grade. His teacher in 4th grade. So I'm a member of Rotary International. I don't know if anybody's ever seen the Rotary wheels, but that's been a big part of my life since actually the year my son was born. My father has been a member of Rotary since the mid 80s. But my true section, my passion of Rotary has always been the youth exchange program. So I previously lived in Colorado. We would send students all across the world, and we would receive students from all across the world. And that was a very cool exchange environment. And my son has been around, kids from all across the globe since he was very young. We've also traveled him a lot. That was one of the things that my wife and I decided, you draw your lines in the sand. Every parent has those lines in the sand.
Yes.
For us, it was traveling him outside of the bubble that he grew up in Colorado, and it was food. We wanted him to be a good eater. Those were two really big, important battles for us. But, I think the circling back to the story here, he's been around these kids his whole life, and his 4th grade teacher, we sent all 3 of her kids to Taiwan. And I said, Barbara, whatever you did with your son or with your kids or your sons at home, please do that with mine in the classroom. And 6 weeks into the 4th grade, my son comes home and he said, Dad, Miss Appel was talking about when they were younger as a family, they lived abroad. And he said, can we do that? I said, yes, we can. So we started like a whole family kind of research project and tried to figure out where we were going to go. And, here we are now, living in Lisbon 3 years. We were coming for 1 year. We're now in our third year here. So that's that, you talk about the change and would I do anything different? No, that's why I wouldn't. Just because I think if kids can learn how to adapt from situation to situation, and honestly, when I'm selecting an exchange student to go abroad, that is the number one skill that I'm looking for. The number one characteristic is this person adaptable? Just by the nature of all the changes that, like imagine if you're a 13, 14-year-old kid, like, you've seen a lot of change in your life compared to maybe other previous 14-year-old kids.
That's for sure. So tell us more about that, the youth international program. I'm so interested to hear, when does that start, and do kids then get placed regularly across the world in exchange programs for?
With Rotary, it goes by district. So like our district in Colorado was Denver, Boulder, up into the mountains of Breckenridge. So the districts can be different sizes. In some cases, it can be a large section of a country, but it's usually a one-to-one exchange. It's over the course of an entire school year. We'll send from Colorado, we would send one kid to Spain, and then Spain would send one kid to Colorado. And, like for me, I always got into it because I like being around international communities. So the part of Rotary International that always appealed to me specifically was the international part. As a result, I got into the youth exchange, and I wanted to be an exchange student when I was a kid. I was never afforded that opportunity, but it's always something that stuck with me that I wish I would have done. So now if I can help facilitate that for others, it's been a big part of the last decade plus for me. And I've seen how much it can change kids in positive ways, where they get perspectives that are just totally different than when they left 10 months before. And it's like you're literally seeing change in the world happen over the course of a year.
Boy, that's great, because not only does that teach kids adaptability, like you said, but also resilience when they're away from what they know. And do these young people actually build it with other families?
Yeah, so with Rotary, the idea is the ideal scenario, you stay with 3 different families over the course of the school year. So it's not just one family, we rotate families. And we do that for many reasons, for varied experiences, to reduce the burden on the host. But generally speaking, it works out for the best that way, because kids, they have 3 different moms and dads and families.
Wow, what an interesting, they would go back to their original families transformed in some way for having had that experience.
Most of the time they do. Yeah.
Yes.
And we always joke that like when a student doesn't want to come home, or when the student gets home and is questioning everything about his or her life, like what am I doing here? What's going on? Again, it goes back to like defining what it means to be human, right?
Yes.
When that happens, when I see a kid honestly struggle with reverse culture shock, like, yes, that means we did our job. That means that whatever experience that student had it was valuable and meaningful, and is making the student question, current surroundings, maybe all the things that he or she thought they wanted to do over the course of what I want to study in college has changed for people, all this stuff. So you never know what can happen. They say that it's a lifetime packed into a year. That's kind of the joke, youth exchange, but it's true.
How old are these young people when they go through an exchange like this?
High school.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
And I'm all about that, those impressionable years, and things that happen in those impressionable years stick with us. As an executive recruiter, we ask people, our candidates, because of a process we use out of Chicago called top grading, about their high school experience and their high points and their low points. And it really does give an indication of who somebody is, not a top rating says in their career, but we believe in their whole life that it impacts. So that's so great that this is happening during those impressionable years, because I believe that could change the course of a person's life in a very positive way.
So historically it's been a very important aspect of U.S. reputation around the world. You have kids that come and live in the U.S. and then they go back and they take that knowledge with them. And
yes,
I think it's extremely important.
Chad, I'd like to ask you some questions from Now You're Talking. And I'm going to start with the impressionable years, which during your high school days. And what would you change, Chad, if you could go back to your high school?
No doubt. I just mentioned it a minute ago. I would have gone on exchange.
You would have gone on exchange because yeah.
That's not even a question.
Yes. Yeah. And how do you think that would have changed where you are today?
I don't know. I've thought about that before. It maybe would have pushed me into a different career path. It definitely would have accelerated my perspective. I think I would have, obviously, maybe had arrived at the perspective that I have anyway. I think I was always kind of destined on that path. But I think I would have probably arrived there quicker. And then potentially, once you have a different perspective, what can you do with that? How much time do you have to use that perspective, or what can you do with that perspective? And it maybe just would have given me more time with a broader worldview.
Okay. Yes. How has your birth order, and I have no idea about this with you, how has your birth order and your family contributed to who you are?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, my sister is younger, and so I think in some ways you sort of develop, well, I can make fun of her, but no one else can mentality.
Yeah, right.
And I feel like that maybe to some degree, but also like when I was younger, I would do certain sports, and then I don't know if it's because I did them or not, but she sort of followed along and was way more accomplished and successful than I ever was. So, hopefully maybe I can pave the way for her a little bit.
So you're the older brother of two.
I am.
It contributes to who we are in some way. So that's interesting. And you'll be thinking about this after we sleep.
Probably will. I'll probably have to call her up and ask her.
Yeah, exactly. Who is your greatest influence and why?
I would say my grandfather. And, just because he had a Renaissance mentality, and you could build things, and you like to paint, and he would write. And, I think for me, as a kid, seeing him create always made me feel like I could too. So I sort of followed that. And then, certainly, his drive to go see the world. And, I was actually, my mom was just here in Lisbon, and I was just kind of thinking about this and talking to her about it. But I remember as a kid, we would go to their house on Saturdays, and we would watch the Love Boat. And then we would lay on the 70s shag carpet floor and watch their slideshows that they would bring out at my sister and my request. And we would watch their slideshows of all the places they had been around the world. And, I still think about like those times were probably pretty influential for me.
Yes. Well, when you think of what you've told me today, your storytelling, so that's from your grandfather, and then you're wanting to see the world. That seed was planted way back when on the 70s shade carpet.
That's right. Yeah. That's an interesting question. Like, does that, and this is, I thought about this one a lot. Does that drive come from nature? Is it nurture? Because my sister doesn't really, her drive to go see things, it's just different, which is totally fine. But, she had the same parents I had. She had the same grandparents. She was sitting next to me on that shag carpet floor.
Right.
But, isn't that kind of weird? Like, you start to think about that stuff, and it's...
Or is it your unique purpose that you've been given, that your sister has her own unique purpose?
Yeah. Because
when you think of the impact that your international youth program had on you and continues to have on you, and that you're impacting so many young people around the world. Yeah. So I think it is all related to why we were put on this planet. When you say figuring out what it is to be human, that for me is you're figuring out why we're here. And as we're going to be asked maybe through AI to figure that out. Each one of us is here to figure that out.
And what's beautiful is it can help us. It can help us do that. I've been working with one of my, kind of assistants or whatever you want to call it, but it's refined and it knows a lot about me and it knows the projects that I'm working on. And It knows the concerns I have, and it knows like about my family, and it knows it knows a lot of things about me in my life. And somebody gave me this idea to drop a prompt and say, essentially, to kind of paraphrase, please tell me the things that you've been trying to tell me that I haven't been hearing or listening to. And the result was mind blowing. Yeah. I was like,
Really?
you're totally right. You know, and if for me it was, you know, you have too many ideas and too many things on the table, you need to focus on a couple of important ones. And I'm like, yes, you're right. I feel like I'm trying to do all this stuff, but I should be focused on, you know, maybe a couple more important things and move on. And then, you know, you get into it and it's like, it knows the things that you're doing. The perspective is pretty incredible.
And that's really great. But that's, again, that spectrum, keeping that within sort of a realm where you can manage that. But if it gets out of control, like anything overdone becomes a weakness. So that too can become a weakness if you're too dependent on it. And tell me if I'm right or I'm wrong. I don't know, but
I fully agree with you.
So yes, but that's fascinating. What about security? Do you worry about that? Like you put your whole life out there?
No, I don't. Man, I probably should be more. And it's not that I'm not careful with things, but I think maybe it comes from marketing, because 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we were in a world where if you don't want to put your information in on a form to download the ebook or whatever it might be, that's fun. You don't have to exchange your information. If you don't have to answer the questions like, you know, what is my biggest challenge? That's fine. You know, you may not get to read the ebook or to preserve security.
Mm-hmm.
But what ultimately happens, and I think it's going to keep happening, is that the more that whatever it is, whether it's a website, whether cookies, or whether it's AI or anything, the more that it knows about your unique challenges and situations, the more your experience is going to be curtailed to your specific needs and to your challenges. So it's kind of a trade-off, right? Yes, something knows more about you, and you know, maybe my AI knows some of the writing projects I'm working on, and is there potential for that to be out there and for it to show up in somebody's, I guess it's possible. But I think the benefit that I get from it is way higher than that risk.
Okay.
And I think the personalization, you know, historically it's been personalization, where things are personalized for you. Yeah, as they're saying at HubSpot right now, you know, in my marketing world, is that, you know, personal is going to be personalized, and things are going to be literally curtailed just for you. Maybe not a list of people that are like you, but just for you. That's, you know, there's power in that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's so fascinating. When was the last time, just a couple more questions, Chad. When was the last time that you were confronted with one of life's greatest lies?
I guess I'd have to start by thinking about what are some of life's greatest lies. I mean, I feel like one of the lies is that, you know, we assume that we have all the time in the world. Like, maybe that's not a lie, it's an assumption, but I think people say it sometimes, like, oh, you have plenty of time. You have plenty of time. Do we? I don't know. Maybe I do, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think, you know, to some degree every day I try to wake up with a little bit of that.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm here living out a dream, living abroad in Portugal. So that's a big one. You can't do this. You can't go live abroad. Well, yeah, we can.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that leads me to my next question is, what dream must you accomplish or you will be filled with regret?
You know, I don't know that I have any. I think I've, in many ways, lived out all my dreams. I just now want to make them more substantial.
Yes.
You know, my dream was to live abroad. My dream was to write a novel. My dream was to attend college at the University of Florida. My dream was to marry my wife and have a wonderful family like I have.
Yes.
So I think those are all fulfilled, but, you know, just deepening them, I think now is maybe where I'm at.
Yeah. Okay. And have you written a novel?
I have. I've written one. I'm in the process of finishing a second one. The first one, I started to send it out looking for agents, and I think I sent it out 50 times, and I got like 49 and a half rejection letters, and I realized how much time it was taking, and I really wanted to work in my second one. So I kind of pushed the querying to the side for now so I could work on the second one. But at some point I've got to get back to sending it out and hopefully finding somebody who will represent it. But maybe AI can help me with that. Maybe I can find a way to leverage AI to find the right type of agent for me. I've looked at that a little bit, but I haven't gone down that rabbit hole completely. So
yeah, well, maybe, yes. Well, and maybe the timing wasn't right, but the time is right now.
Yes, true.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know. I'll say this real quick about writing, because I finished the first one, like, I guess it was last year, and I was visiting a friend, and we were all out having lunch, and one of the guys at the table, like, oh, you just finished, writing a book. I'm like, yeah, it's first draft, whatever. It was the final draft. I'm like, yeah, I just kind of finished the last draft, and I'm going to start sending it out. And he's like, well, what did you learn? Like, without hesitation, I had to write a second one. I mean, there was no thought. It was just like an instinctual reaction.
Yes.
Once you do one, now, okay, time for the next one.
Yes. Well, I just published my book. The book, it came out 2 weeks ago. And
amazing.
I have to say,
congratulations.
It was, thank you. It is one of the most transformational experiences that I've ever had. And because I never knew what was going to land on paper. I would get into a routine where I would write 3 or 4 times a week, and the people that were coaching me to write my book, they said, do not just write, and that's what I did. I just typed and typed, and I just was always surprised actually by what landed on paper. So you need that, and I was also thankful that I didn't have AI to fall back on. I mean, it was there, but I didn't use it to fall back on, because I think I would have always been second guessing myself. So about what I had said, and could I have said it better some way else, if AI was there as my partner. But
that's a very interesting point. Did you write fiction? Was it fiction?
No, it's my life story. It's more of a self-help. It's called Unravel You. So when you go back and you think about what it was like in your grandfather's place, watching those little slides, those little square slides, probably going around that rotation on the carpet. They say, how does that impact you? Those experiences, what people have said, how does that then become our thoughts and who we are in the world?
Fascinating.
So, but all starting in high school. So one more question. You may have just already told me this, but finish this sentence, because I want you to put it out there, Chad. I wish I had the nerve to. I
mean, I guess finish the next book and figure out what the third one is.
And get one published.
Yeah.
Yes.
And, the other thing too is I don't know that there's a true answer to that, because I think right now, and this is the beauty of where we're at in the world right now, and with the timing of everything is.
Yes.
Who knows what's possible, right? I think the answer to that question is probably something I haven't thought of yet, quite honestly.
Yeah. Yes.
Because that's where those dreams, those unfulfilled dreams, like those are things that I probably haven't thought of yet.
Yes.
Right now is a great time to have those kinds of thoughts.
Yes.
I think one of the neat things, kind of taking it back to the business world and with HubSpot and those, where our agency is a partner with them, and their co-founder has recently done a TED Talk, and he leads it off by saying, in the future, I will compete with AI. Like, what does that mean? Okay.
Yeah, what does that mean?
There's ambiguity there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in the future, I will compete with AI, like meaning it's going to be my adversary, or I will compete with AI like it's going to be my friend and help me, be a better competitor. And yes. I see it as the second one clearly, but I think it's interesting times, and I think to have that ability, to take his other point that he always says the most important trait that anybody can have right now in business, and I extrapolate this to life in general, is to be curious and yes. Go and sit down with AI, or even if it's not AI, just be curious. Like go learn something and go ask if something's possible. Go ask if there's any way I can do this. Help me do this. I want to write a book. Help me. What are the steps I need to take to write a book, or whatever it is? It's all possible. It's all right there for us.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. So what are some words of wisdom from your perspective that you can share with people who are listening to this podcast, parents of teens and preteens, but also from your business perspective and how you see the world?
Well, I'm going to actually flip it back to your board game. One of the cool concepts about the game that I could tell would probably be the part that I most enjoy was when you're selecting your value cards, right? So
Yes.
I think everybody should figure out like really what their values are. What are the things that I stand for? What are the things that matter to me? Put them on a document. Take that document and put it into AI and save it. So when you're working on projects or working on something, it knows what your values are. And, you could say, please help me come up with an idea to do X, Y, and Z, keeping in mind my core values. So I think that's a piece of advice I would give is know what those values are. And then going back to what Dharmesh Shah said at HubSpot, be curious. It's be curious to do the things that, you want to do, to ask the questions that you want the answers to ask if it's possible. And then I guess if there's a third one, are you familiar with Stephen Pressfield?
No.
Stephen Pressfield, he wrote a book called The War of Art, and it's absolutely fantastic. You can grab it. It's very short. You could read a section each morning, almost like a page a day calendar kind of thing. But he always talks about resistance with a capital R, and the things that, when you want to do something, when you're trying to accomplish something, whether, you just wrote a book, I'm sure there are many days you sat down and felt that resistance with a capital R, right? Like, I'm not doing this today. And I've got dishes to clean, or I've got to take the dog for a walk, or I got to, whatever it is,
Or I'm afraid. I'm afraid to put it out in the world. Yes.
I'm afraid it's not good enough. Like, these words aren't there, all of those things like that, that's capital R resistance that, Stephen Pressfield always talks about. And I think the third thing would just be recognizing that and knowing that it's in the room and saying, okay, you're here. I don't care. I'm going to do this anyway. And, just having the courage to sort of stand up to the resistance. And, as he says, the bigger the resistance levels are, the bigger the project and the more meaningful project that you're working on, and the more that you're supposed to be doing that project. So.
Great words to live by. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. And I'm sure people who are listening will have lots of things to think about after our conversation today.
I enjoyed it as well. It's always nice to talk to people who like to talk about important things.
Well, thank you very much. It's been great having you here.
Thank you so much.
Chad's insights on AI, storytelling, and parenting in the digital era remind us that technology doesn't have to replace connection. It can enhance it when we use it intentionally. If this conversation sparked ideas about creativity, growth, or raising kids with curiosity, please subscribe, rate, and share this podcast so more families can find these conversations. You've been listening to Now You're Talking, parenting with a busy career while guiding kids through the lure of screens isn't easy, but meaningful connection is always worth it. Take a moment to start a conversation with someone you care about. It could be the highlight of their day. Until next time, let the conversations begin. Now You're Talking.